Hello children, today we are going to take up a new chapter from Echoes, Quality by John Galsworthy. I knew him from the days of my extreme youth because he made my father's boots, inhabiting with his elder brother two little shops let into one in a small by street now no more, but then most fashionably placed in the West End. Fashionably means very stylishly. This is told to us by the narrator that he knew somebody who made his father's boot from his early youth. That tenement had a certain quiet distinction. Distinction means unique feature. There was no sign upon its face that he made for any of the royal family, merely his own German name of Gessler Brothers, and in the window a few pairs of boots. In the window he had only displayed a few pairs of boots. I remember that it was always troubled me to account for those unwearing boots in the window, unwearing, never changing. For he made only what was ordered, reaching nothing down, and it seemed so inconceivable that what he made could ever have failed to fit. He always took orders and prepared the boots for his customers. He was a perfectionist, and whatever he made, it fit the person who bought the shoes made by him. Had he bought them to put there, that too seemed inconceivable. He would never have tolerated in his house leather on which he had not worked himself. Besides, they were too beautiful. The pair of pumps so inexpressibly slim, the patent leathers with cloth tops making water come into one's mouth. The tall brown riding boots with marvelous sooty glow, sooty covered with black powder, as if though new they had been worn 100 years. Those pairs could only have been made by one who saw before him the sole of boot. So truly were they prototypes incarnating the very spirit of all footgear. Prototypes means first form of something from which all later forms develop. And incarnating, giving it a definite human form. So here the narrator is wondering whether those boots which he displayed on the window, whether he had bought them from somewhere to display it there. But this idea also was something which he could not imagine. A person who knew the art of making boots so perfectly could understand. These thoughts, of course, came to me later, though even when I was promoted to him, at the age of perhaps 14, some inkling haunted me of the dignity of himself and brother. For to make boots, such boots as he made, seemed to me then and still seems to me mysterious and wonderful. Now here he says the narrator was introduced to the boot makers when he was only 14. He wonders how could a person make such a beautiful pair of shoes. I remember well my shy remark one day while stretching out to him my youthful foot. Isn't it awfully hard to do, Mr. Gessler? And his answer given with a sudden smile from out the sardonic redness of his beard. It is an art. Sardonic means mocking. And it is an art means it is an art. This is all he said. Himself, he was a little as if he made from leather, with his yellow crinkly face and crinkly reddish hair and beard, and neat folds slanting down his cheeks to the corners of his mouth. Here he seems to be early. And his guttural and one-toned voice, guttural means sound produced deep in the throat, For leather is a sardonic substance and stiff and slow of purpose. He is being compared to the leather he works on. And that was the character of his face, save that his eyes, which were grey blue, had in them the simple gravity of one secretly possessed by the ideal. His elder brother was so very like him, though watery, paler in every way, with a great industry, that sometimes in early days I was not quite sure of him until the interview was over. Then I knew that it was he, if the words, "I will ask my brother is brother," had not been spoken, and that if they had, it was his elder brother. They were two brothers, and the narrator here tells us that he could not differentiate between the two because they were so alike. When one grew old and wild and ran up bills, one somehow never ran them up with Jessler brothers. It would not have seemed becoming to go in there and stretch out one's foot to that blue iron spectacled glance, owing him for more than, say, two pairs, just the comfortable reassurance that one was still his client. For it was not possible to go to him very often. His boots lasted terribly, having something beyond the temporary, some as it were, essence of boot stitched into them. The narrator says that most of the time people did not indent with such people like the Jessler brothers. They normally paid up as soon as they got the material from the Jessler brothers. The narrator also says once you take a pair of boots from the Jessler brothers, they normally did not have to go back to them again. One went in, not as into most shops in the mood of, "Please serve me and let me go," but restfully as one enters a church and sitting on the single wooden chair, waited, for there was never anybody there. Here we are told that whenever people went into the Jessler brothers' shop, they did not hurry, they did not rush things. They normally waited quietly as if they had entered a church. And they had to wait for some time because normally none of the two brothers present. Soon over the top edge of that sort of well, rather dark and smelling soothingly of leather, which formed the shop, there would be seen his face or that of his elder brother peering down. Peering means looking. A guttural sound and the tip-tap of bast slippers beating the narrow wooden stairs. Bast is fiber from certain trees. And he would stand before one without coat, a little bent in leather apron with sleeves turned back, blinking as if awakened from some dream of boots, or like an owl surprised in daylight and annoyed at this interruption. So normally, as we have already discussed, the customer had to wait for one of them to come down the steps and then only would they attend the customer. And I would say, "How do you do, Mr. Jessler? Could you make me a pair of Russia leather boots?" Without a word, he would leave me retiring whence he came or into the other portion of the shop. Retiring means going back. And I would continue to rest in the wooden chair, inhaling the incense of his trade. Incense means smell. Soon he would come back holding in his thin, veined hand a piece of gold brown leather. Veined means marked with veins. Why? Because he is an old man. With eyes fixed on it, he would remark, "What a beautiful piece." Beautiful piece means what a beautiful piece. When I too had admired it, he would speak again. "When do you want them?" Means when do you want them? And I would answer, oh, as soon as you conveniently can. And he would say, tomorrow fortnight. Or if he were his elder brother, I will ask my brother. Then I would murmur, thank you. Good morning, Mr. Jessler. He used to say, good morning. He would reply, still looking at the leather in his hand, and as I moved to the door, I would hear the tip-tap of his vast slippers restoring him up the stairs to his dream of boots. But if it were some new kind of foot gear that he had not yet made me, then indeed he would observe ceremony. Observe ceremony means in a customary way, looking at it with eyes at once critical and loving, as if recalling the glow with which he had created it, and rebuking the way in which one had disorganized the masterpiece. Then, placing my foot on a piece of paper, he would 2 or 3 times tickle the outer edges with a pencil and pass his nervous fingers over my toes, feeling himself into the heart of my requirements. So the next thing he would do was he would take a paper, pencil, and then he would take the measurements of the narrator's foot, enjoying every moment of the work that he was doing. I cannot forget that day on which I had occasion to say to him, Mr. Jessler, that last pair of town walking boots creaked, That means there was a complaint. He made a complaint. He looked at me for a time without replying, as if expecting me to withdraw or qualify the statement, then said, it shouldn't have creaked. Creaked means creaked. It did, I am afraid, the narrator said. You got them wet before they found themselves. Got them wet means you got them wet. No, I don't think so. At that he lowered his eyes as if hunting for memory of those boots, and I felt sorry I had mentioned this grave thing. Mr. Jessler could not imagine that he could have made a mistake in producing any pair of boots that would have creaked. So he was trying to recall which pair of boots the narrator was actually talking about. Send them back. He says, send them back. I will look at them. A feeling of compassion for my creaking boots surged up in me. Compassion, a strong feeling of sympathy. And surged up means aroused a strong feeling. So well could I imagine the sorrowful long curiosity of regard which he would bend on them. So he knew very well that once Mr. Jessler got those pair of boots that the narrator is complaining of, he knew that Mr. Jessler would try to find out his mistake he had made in producing that particular pair. Some boots means some boots, he said slowly, are bad from birth. If I can do nothing with them, I take them off your bill. He says, if I can do nothing with them, I will take them off your bill. That means I will not take the money. Alright, I will not take the money from you. Once only, I went absent-mindedly into his shop in a pair of boots bought in an emergency at some large firms. So one day the narrator went into the Jessler's shop with a pair of boots which he had bought from some other shop. He took my order without showing me any leather, and I could feel his eyes penetrating the inferior integument. Integument means covering of my foot. At last he said, those are not my boots. He says, so he could recognize his own piece of art. The tone was not one of anger, nor of sorrow, not even of contempt. Contempt means disrespect. But there was in it something quiet that froze the blood. The way he said, The narrator felt a little awkward. He put his hand down and pressed a finger on the place where the left boot, endeavoring to be fashionable, was not quite comfortable. Endeavoring means looking. So the pair of boots might have been looking very fashionable, might be of the very latest design, but it was not actually comfortable for the narrator. And Mr. Jessler could immediately point out where it was causing discomfort to the narrator. It hurts you there, he said. Those big worms, worms are firms, have no self-respect, trash. And then, as if something had given way within him, he spoke long and bitterly. It was the only time I ever heard him discuss the conditions and hardships of his trade. They get it all. It is it. He said they get it by advertisement, not by work. Alright, so he says, he's trying to say that all the big firms seem to be getting all their customers through advertisements, not through their work, not through their hard work. They take it away from us who loaf our boots. Loaf means love. It comes to this. It comes to this. Presently, I have no work. Presently, he says, I have no work. Every year it gets less, you will see. And looking at his lined face, I saw things I had never noticed before. Bitter things and bitter struggle. And what a lot of grey hairs there seemed suddenly in his red beard. Mr. Jessler has grown very old. As best I could, I explained the circumstances of the purchase of those ill-omened boots. But his face and voice made so deep impression that during the next few minutes, I ordered many pairs. The narrator felt very sorry for Mr. Jessler, so he ordered for more pairs than he actually required. Nemesis fell. They lasted more terribly than ever, and I was not able consistentiously to go to him for nearly 2 hours. Now, Nemesis is the goddess of retribution. The narrator suffered retribution in the sense that he could not meet Jessler for 2 years after that. When at last I went, I was surprised to find that outside one of the 2 little windows of his shop, another name was pointed, also that of a bootmaker, making, of course, for the royal family. So after 2 years, when he finally went, he found the different name outside the shop of the Jessler brothers. And this name, it was also mentioned that they were producing boots for the royal family. The old familiar boots, no longer in dignified isolation, were huddled in the single window. Inside, the now contracted well of the one little shop was more scented and darker than ever. When he entered the shop, he found the scent was even more stronger what it had been earlier. And it was longer than usual too, before a face peered down and the tip-tap of the bast slippers began. At last he stood before me and gazing through those rusty iron spectacles said, Mr. Isn't it? That means he couldn't recall. Ah, Mr. Jessler, I stammered, but your boots are really too good, you know. You know, see, these are quite decent still. And I stretched out to him my foot. He looked at it. Yes, he said, people do not want good boots, it seems. People do not want good boots, it seems. To get away from his reproachful eyes and voice, I hastily remarked. Hastily means quickly. I quickly remarked, what have you done to your shop? He answered quietly, it was too expensive. It was too expensive to maintain the shop. Do you want some boots? I ordered 3 pairs, though I had only wanted 2, and quickly left. I do not know quite what feeling of being part in his mind of a conspiracy against him, or not perhaps so much against him as against his idea of boot. One does not, I suppose, care to feel like that, for it was again many months before my next visit to his shop, paid, I remember, with the feeling, oh, well, I can't leave the old boy, so here goes. Perhaps it will be his elder brother. On this visit, when he saw a different name on the board, he orders 3 pairs of boots. And after that, again, there was a lapse of time and he does not go back. And finally goes back after a quite long time and he thinks he would meet his elder brother. For his elder brother, I knew, had not character enough to reproach me even dumbly. Reproach means criticize. And to my relief, in the shop, there did appear to be his elder brother handling a piece of leather. Well, Mr. Jessler, I said, how are you? He came close and peered at me. I am pretty well, he said slowly, but my elder brother is dead. He says, during the time when the narrator had not visited them, the older one had died. And I saw that it was indeed himself, but how aged and wan, and never before had I heard him mention his brother much shocked. I murmured, oh, I'm sorry. Yes, he answered, he was a good man, he made a good boot, but he is dead. And he touched the top of his head, where the hair had suddenly gone as thin as it had been on that of his poor brother, to indicate, I suppose, the cause of death. He could not get over losing the other shop. Means, he says, my brother could not get over losing the other shop. Do you want any boots? And he held up the leather in his hand. It's a beautiful piece. I ordered several pairs. It was very long before they came, but they were better than ever. One simply could not wear them out, and soon after that I went abroad. It was over a year before I was again in London, and the first shop I went to was my old friend's. I had left a man of 60. I came back to one of 75, pinched and worn and tremulous. Tremulous means slightly shaking. Who genuinely this time did not at first know me. He says here he came back after a year and there was much a vast difference. He left a man of 60, but when he came back it appeared as if Mr. Jessler had suddenly turned 75. So old he was looking. He was even shaking. He even could not recognize the narrator at first. Oh, Mr. Jessler, I said, sick at heart, how splendid your boots are. See, I have been wearing this pair nearly all the time I have been abroad, and they are not half worn out, are they? He looked long at my boots, a pair of Russia leather, and his face seemed to regain steadiness. Steadiness means uniformity. Putting his hand on my instep, he said, do they vid you here? Vid means fit. I had trouble with that bear, I remember. Bear means pair while making. I assured him that they had fitted beautifully. Do you want any boots? He said, I can make them quickly. It is a slag time. Dime means time, means less business. I answered, yeah, please, please. I want boots all round, every kind. I will make a fresh model. Fresh means fresh. Your foot must be bigger. And foot is here, foot. and with utter slowness he traced round my foot and felt my toes, only once looking up to say, "Did I tell you my brother was dead?" So that means he has forgotten that he had already mentioned it to the narrator that his brother had died. To watch him was painful. So feeble had he grown, I was glad to get away. I had given those boots up. When one evening they came, opening the parcel, I set the 4 pairs out in a row. Then, one by one, I tried them on. There was no doubt about it. In shape and fit, in finish and quality of leather, they were the best he had ever made me. And in the mouth of one of the town walking boots, I found his bill. The amount was the same as usual, but it gave me quite a shock. He had never before sent it in till quarter day. I flew downstairs and wrote a check and posted it at once with my own hand. One thing shocked him here. In the mouth of one of the boots, he found the bill, which normally Mr. Jessler never used to send. The narrator immediately realized his mistake, that he should have been prompt in paying. So immediately he wrote a check. A week later, passing the little street, I thought I would go in and tell him how splendidly the new boots fitted. But when I came to where his shop had been, his name was gone. Still there in the window were the slim pumps, the patent leathers with cloth tops, the sooty riding boots. I went in, very much disturbed. In the 2 little shops, again made into one, was a young man with an English face. "Mr. Jessler in?" I said. He gave me a strange, ingratiating look. "No, sir," he said. "No, but we can attend to anything with pleasure. We have taken the shop over. You have seen our name, no doubt, next door. We make for some very good people." "Yes, yes," I said. "But Mr. Jessler?" "Oh," he answered, "dead." "Dead? But I only received these boots from him last Wednesday week." "Ah," he said, "a shocking go. Poor old man starved himself. Good God." The narrator is shocked to know that Mr. Jessler starved himself to death. Slow starvation, the doctor called it. You see, he went to work in such a way, would keep the shop on, wouldn't have a soul touch his boots except himself. When he got an order, it took him such a time. People won't wait. He lost everybody, and there he would sit, going on and on. I will say that for him, not a man in London made a better boot. But look at the competition. He never advertised. Would have the best leather too, and do it all himself. Well, there it is. What could you expect with his ideas? He says Mr. Jessler used to keep on working. He used to have his shop open till he finished his work. And he would work on the leather all by himself. And on top of everything, he never advertised. He never gave time for himself, and he was always at work. But starvation, that may be a bit flowery, as the saying is, but I know myself he was sitting over his boots day and night to the very last. You see, I used to watch him. Never gave himself time to eat. Never had a penny in the house. So maybe it was because he did not have money in the house, so he did not have the food in the house. All went in rent and leather. How he lived so long, I don't know. He regularly let his fire go out. There were many times when he did not cook a single meal. He was a character, but he made good boots. Yes, I said, he made good boots. And I turned and went out quickly, for I did not want that youth to know that I could hardly see. So, children, why the narrator could not see? Because he had tears in his eyes. When he realized how Mr. Jessler, how both the Jesslers had given up their lives because they were in poverty. Despite the fact that they had the business of making boots, but still they did not have enough money to make their ends meet. So we can say that this chapter is rightly and aptly titled by the author Quality.